Hey, family. So, 28-year-old Mrs. Lizzie has quite a situation at hand. Please listen to her little story, drop your hot take, and find out what others had to say about it. Please also note that some sensitive words have been deliberately mispronounced or edited to keep up with content guidelines. Welcome to the Town Hall. Now over to OP. Hi, everyone. I have a question. I am currently 37 weeks pregnant, and I'm having a boy. At first, the thought of him getting circumcised wasn't a big deal to me, but now the closer I'm getting to my due date, the more I'm scared to do it. My husband is circumcised, and he believes it's a must to circumcise our baby. I come from a Hispanic household, so most of my family members are not circumcised, and it kind of makes me feel guilty of getting it done. Not only that, but I also feel guilty for putting my baby through that pain. It's a part of me that wants to do it, only because I'm scared my son will grow up and not take care of himself, or that anything might happen. But I also don't want to do it because he's going to be in so much pain. My husband's entire family members support the act, and it's just only me against them. So I'm on here to ask people for their opinions about circumcising versus uncircumcising, and if it's better to just let my husband decide since he's a guy. Please tell me what to do. After making this post, you would naturally expect more opinions to lean towards OP's point of view, but surprisingly, the majority of comments from users seem to suggest that circumcision might not really be a bad idea after all. Some folks actually believed it is necessary for the health of the baby boy. Listen to the hot takes and counter-arguments, then tell us what you think. Mark140 posted, "Despite what others may tell you, ma'am, if you have a good doctor, the procedure is no issue. It will help him last longer sexually and keep him cleaner. It also reduces prostate cancer. You are not permanently damaging your baby. Also, it should be both parents' choices, so talk it out with your husband. And good luck to you." Replying, someone asked, "How about leaving the decision to the person who has to live with it?" Well, that is of course an option. It's just much more traumatic on an adult than an infant. And lots of choices are made by parents for children. Kids don't really get lots of choices. But, yeah, Mark actually has a point in this. As young children, we rarely get to decide what happens to our bodies, and we can't advocate for our rights, which is kind of painful from a realist POV. But what can they do? Opposing Mark 140, Mrs. Marie then said, "This is why the argument is really about bodily autonomy and treating children as people who parents have a responsibility to and not just mere property. Performing surgery on healthy tissue without the patient's consent is mutilation. Circumcision is the only case where we're still debating that fact." Arnold replied Mrs. Marie, stating, "Children cannot really have bodily autonomy. They do not have the ability to make decisions about their own bodies. It's why they can't choose if they get vaccinated or not, or if they get a haircut. That ends up being a parent choice. Children are not fully people. That is just how life works. Simple." Well, putting elective surgery in the same category as a haircut is absurd, Marie countered. For one thing, haircuts are not permanent. You have a bit more traction with the vaccine argument, but even then, a vaccine has long-term benefits without causing permanent damage to healthy tissue in the majority of cases. All surgeries cause permanent damage to healthy tissue, so any surgery performed without the patient's consent needs to be necessary to sustain life and limit disability. Circumcision is not life-saving, nor does it prevent disability. Well, the pros and cons of each one isn't my point. If you don't have bodily autonomy for a vaccine, you don't have it for surgery. Either you have bodily autonomy or you don't. It's not a half-measure thing. It doesn't matter what the child may have wanted. They don't have the right or the ability to choose. I understand it sucks, but children just don't have rights. That's all I can say. So it's somehow clear that a surgery is not quite the same thing as a haircut, especially when we're discussing a painful process like this, right? But of a fact, children do not really have a lot of choices, which is for an entirely different topic. The main issue from the previous opinions seems to be more about striking a balance between momentary pain and lifelong benefits. But is it often a more traumatic experience than we might hope for? Let's dive deeper.
I scrolled all the way down to find out more interesting takes on the topic. It seemed more and more people were actually siding OP's husband. It seems most people feel circumcision is not as barbaric and evil as we think. A middle-aged commenter presented a very fine point that's worth listening to. He said, "The anti-circumcision community online is extremely ideological. It's very hard to find objective advice on this matter. I'm actually uncircumcised, and so are my 2 sons. But honestly, I wish I had it done as a baby, and so far, wish I had my oldest son circumcised." The main issue many more uncircumcised boys will experience than is ever reported is phimosis. Phimosis is when the foreskin doesn't stretch enough to pull back and expose the glands, the head of the penis. There's also ballooning when they pee, but that shouldn't be painful. Circumcision solves this, but it is pretty drastic. Another method to resolve this is stretching. You can check out the procedure online. I had phimosis and my son has it too. My experience with it was awkward, painful zegs in my teens and 20s. It eventually went away, but even today I have to be careful at the beginning of zegs. And you'll hear that circumcision removes sensitivity and that a circumcised man doesn't feel as much pleasure. Well, I can report that a penis head that's always sheltered by a foreskin is way too sensitive, and it's not the good kind of sensitive. After months or years of stretching, then there's desensitization exercises. I'm trying to be neutral here because I know I'll get attacked. So I will say, yes, circumcision is a pretty drastic intervention for phimosis. But months and years of stretching exercises and inserting rings in your organ and being scared of what might happen during intercourse is quite something to worry about. The one thing I keep saying about all this is that the only men who I ever hear talking about their penises are uncircumcised, and almost never positive. Apart from a few circumcised men who claim they were wronged and traumatized, circumcised men don't talk about their penises at all. That's all I can say. That was a truly honest take from an experienced father, but someone had an opposing viewpoint to it. Countering the gentleman, he wrote, "Mister, I'm not here to belittle your experience, obviously. Your point of view is valid. Having said that, the thing that needs to be remembered here is that it is not your body being discussed when you or OP talk about circumcising children. You are discussing making a decision for someone else regarding what you admit is a drastic intervention. If we were discussing appendectomies for infants, you would recognize that doing so preemptively is inappropriate. Please hold the same energy regarding circumcision and phimosis. What if, and this may sound crazy to some people, what if you people didn't cut anything off a newborn simply because it's possible that something could potentially go wrong, and instead just waited to see if it became necessary for a very, very good reason before making that kind of decision?" Another user threw back at her, "It's really absurd to view it like that. Let's be honest, experiencing such bodily pain as an adult would be much more traumatic than anything else. Also, I'm pretty sure excruciating pain at one of his most important and sensitive organs will be a great early life experience and not have lasting traumatic effects whatsoever." That was too simplistic, and it earned him a not-so-polite reply. Someone lashed out saying, "What kind of argument is this? Childbirth is necessary for life, and circumcision is not. Do you think about the trauma he or she goes through during the process and how it might affect it?" Well, he replied, "Life will always have trauma, and taking my 8-year-old to doctors to inspect his male organ, his parents having to put cream on his organ every day, his having to do stretching exercises, all of this not working, everyone paying attention to his male organ, all of this probably somewhat traumatic for an 8-year-old. Compare that to a newborn going through a circumcision on what is already the most traumatic day of his life. Again, circumcise that baby, and that's the last of his member being a topic of discussion. Don't do it, and there's a high chance he's in for all sorts of adventures with the little thing." That's BS, and you really should know better. Otherwise, babies with really traumatic births, the really misshapen heads and bruised bodies, would traumatize them for their entire lives. And yet, in a few months, there is no difference. Please stop spreading obvious nonsense.
Oh, well, that was a lot.
But perhaps what we would consider the most experienced reply came from a grandfather who's managed a couple of male newborns. From his comment, it seems the matter is not the big deal we make it to be. Let's hear from him. Now listen, guys, he wrote, my son, grandsons, and all my nephews and friends' babies experienced far more excruciating pain from infant vaccinations than from circumcision. Infants in excruciating pain do not feed or sleep well, which was indeed evident after vaccination. Meanwhile, within 3 minutes after circumcision was completed, all these infants were nursing contentedly. I don't personally give a shit if people choose not to circumcise their infants. I just don't like misinformation being spread. Well, what do you guys think of the argument so far? Which side are you on? Please put your thoughts below as we delve into the rest of the conversation. I took my time to also go through some of the more lenient responses from other commenters. There were lots of valid takes to prove that circumcision is an outdated misnomer that should never happen again. One user was quite blunt about it. I think this is just another example of the weird places culture takes you to. If it weren't a tradition, if you had never even heard of it before, and someone asked you, are you going to have your boy's foreskin removed? You'd probably call the cops on them. What kind of question is that? Who would even think of doing that, let alone actually do it? It's a culture thing, and deserves to be abolished forever. People have the right to control their own bodies. It is the most fundamental of all human rights. If a person isn't old enough to consent to having their genitals surgically altered, you should not surgically alter their genitals. My husband is circumcised. We're in the UK, and his parents just followed the trend at the time. He thinks it's extremely barbaric and unethical too. He definitely believes he lacks sensitivity and struggles to orgasm during PIV intercourse. With modern-day hygiene practices, there's absolutely no reason to bother with it. I've never understood it or where this idea comes from that we need to altercate our boys in such a fashion. Safe to say, we won't be doing the same to our son when he is born. Here in the UK, we outlawed female genital altercation a few years ago. It's honestly surprising that we haven't done the same for males. Iceland tried, but the ADL and other religious interest groups cry-bullied them out of it. Religious lobbies are so powerful. It quite sounds like she has a little beef with the ADL. However, going down, I found what resonated as the most educated response. Initial research, a throwaway account, had this to say.
It's mostly all down to religion. I know a lot of them. In fact, I'm actually one of them. I'm from a religion that promotes it, but essentially it's all down to the parents. There was a big phase during the 80s and early 90s to get a lot of boys done. Although I don't mind that I've had it done, I think it's wrong to remove the choice from someone. I should have been an adult first and made that logical choice myself. As an adult, I doubt I would want to go through that pain unless there was a medical issue, and would likely have chosen not to go through with it. What's worse is that I'm an atheist, so it was literally forced upon me, as was the notion of God and religion. I also think they should not be taught to children and should allow critical and logical thinking adults to hear it and make up their minds. I doubt any adult would believe many, if any, of the stories from any of the major books of religions. We could devote so much more money and resources into science and development. This is exactly how I feel about it. I'm not against it entirely, but we should be leaving a decision like that up to the individual to make when they're 18. If you wouldn't get your newborn a tattoo, you shouldn't be getting them permanent non-medical procedures. Well then, so far so good. That was all I could take. So, what do you all think about all this? Are you siding OP's husband, or do you think it's all a barbaric cultural thing? Should OP support her husband in circumcising their son, or should she stick to her guts and reject the altercation of his foreskin? Let's meet in the comments. What exactly would you do if you were in her situation?